I'm endlessly fascinated and curious about the world around us, about business, about politics, about the arts, about culture, developments, social issues, and the people. Most importantly, about the people that are shaping our future. Every night, I get the opportunity to have conversations, to dive into conversations with thought leaders, with change makers, entrepreneurs, politicians, and everyday heroes who unpack the ideas and stories that I think matter to all of us. What's the future of our economy? What's the future of our country? How do we build stronger communities? What can we learn from music, theater, sports, politics, the arts? How does policy shape our real lives? What does leadership look like, real leadership in today's environment? If it's interesting and relevant and topical and we're talking about it, you'll hear about it here at 6 o'clock on the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. I want to have real conversations, in-depth conversations. These are ideas we're sharing. This is the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. Thanks for joining me. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. I've got a really interesting topic and a guest to introduce you to tonight. Selling a house, buying a house, dealing with all the issues one has to deal with during a divorce. I've got with me Michael Shuster. He's written about this. He's specialized in it for over a decade. So I think it's going to be an interesting conversation tonight because regrettably, well, actually some people may not think regrettably, but about half of us end up going through divorces and we end up having to sell homes. So how is selling a home in divorce different than an ordinary sale? And what are the biggest mistakes to avoid? Michael Shuster is with us today. In 2011, Michael became Ontario's first real estate divorce specialist, and in 2019, Ontario's first certified divorce specialist. Most people thinking selling a home in a divorce is the same as any other sale, but it's not, because Michael thinks that there's so many different questions that need to be answered in a divorce sale, and mistakes that he has maybe made some of, or at least seen some of, and things that we think need to be avoided. He's written a best-selling book on it. Michael Shuster, welcome to the show. What's the name of the book?
Here, I have a copy of it. Divorce and Selling Your Home. Everything legal, financial, and practical that you need to know.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us. So, what's different in selling a home during a divorce? Please tell us.
Great question. We could talk literally for hours if we had the time, but let's start just like anything else, building a house or building a relationship, the foundation. And what people don't realize, some people think selling a matrimonial home in divorce or other real estate assets in a divorce is the same as any other typical real estate sale. A realtor puts a sign on the lawn, puts it on the MLS, and buyers come and see it. Not quite so. The foundation when you're selling a matrimonial home in divorce is the lack of ability to come to agreement. And what I mean by that is if a single person or anybody in a relationship, whether it's a marriage, common law, just two people living together, when they're going to sell a home, a house or a condo, usually they're in agreement that they want to move. They're in agreement on why they're moving, where they're moving, when they're hiring realtors, when they're choosing a listing price, an asking price, accepting offers. Usually they're in agreement with everything. And for the things that they're not in total agreement with, they have an ability to communicate effectively with each other. They have an ability to reach an agreement. And the reality is the Family Law Act and the Divorce Act intersect with the Real Estate Act. And what that means is no spouse can sell or sign documents or do anything with a matrimonial home without the agreement of the other spouse. So the foundational difference is when you're going through divorce, whether it's amicable or acrimonious or anything in between, there's a lack of ability in most cases for the two spouses to communicate well and come to an agreement on everything that needs to be agreed upon.
Well, one would think that's a little obvious given that they're divorced or divorcing, such that communication was probably a problem.
It's obvious that communication is a problem. What's not obvious is how it affects the sale of the home, because you do have to be in agreement for both people to sign willingly.
So tell me, does this apply to just the matrimonial home or to other assets? If they have a cottage or a second home or a place in Florida or something like that?
Another great question. It only applies to what is deemed to be a matrimonial home by legal definition. Now, for people that wonder, people are viewers, listeners are going to say, oh, well, I got this in an inheritance, or I met my spouse before we were married and I put money into the cottage or the investment property or the home in Florida, whatever it is. Please don't mistake me. I'm not a lawyer. I don't give legal advice, but I am well enough educated on the topic to say there is an equalization process and you still may be entitled to there's a financial settlement that's equalized and laws that apply to that. And that's in the lawyer's territory. But to answer your question, Brian, when it comes to selling a legally defined matrimonial property, that's where these laws that and processes that we're going to talk about today specifically apply.
Why is it so much more controversial when it's a matrimonial home?
Well, first of all, for most people, unless it's a high net worth divorce or people are independently wealthy, for most people, the most money that they're going, even whether you live paycheck to paycheck or you make enough money that you still can put some money away for retirement in a rainy day, when you're getting divorced and you're going to have to buy or move out and start over on one income instead of two, and you're going to have to pay legal fees and everything else, for most people, the most amount of money is going to come out of the settlement through the sale of the divorce. You sell a home for $1 million, $2 million, whatever, 800,000. You split that. It's a large amount of money. So that makes most people nervous. The other thing is, and this is what I think is more to your point, is it's the only place where either spouse can try to assert control. And what I mean by that is, and by the way, I've been through a divorce myself, so I'm not only speaking from the business aspect, but the emotional aspect. And a lot of what I do is not just real estate, but understanding people. And aside from the money aspect, when you split up and you're going to get divorced, you each hire your own lawyer. You each hire your own financial advisor or investment consultant. You each hire your own therapist if necessary. You each hire your own divorce coach. Any professionals and anybody in your life moving forward works for you and you alone. And your spouse or soon to be ex cannot access them to influence them or get information about you from them, except your realtor. Because of the matrimonial laws of a the laws of a matrimonial home, when I list a matrimonial home for sale, both spouses, regardless of why they're breaking up, regardless of who did what or whatever the case may be, they are both equally my client. And so when you're going through divorce and you feel like you might be losing control and going through a lot of turmoil, it's human nature. People would rather be in control than be controlled. So you've lost control of the whole divorce process. The settlements, the equalization, everything is defined by the law. When it comes to how should we stage your house? Which realtor should we hire? How much should we charge? How much should we accept? Blah, 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 blah. You're both dealing with the realtor. And so emotions cloud good judgment, but there's this this need for control. So since they can't get control in any other part of the process, they start trying to influence the realtor if the realtor isn't trained in selling divorce properties, and they start trying to control the process. So that's why, to answer your question.
So let me ask you a question on that. If one house is in one of the partner's names, but it's still a matrimonial home, and I've seen this document where on a real estate agency, the person who is not on title but is part of the partnership has to just sign one spot in the form. Does that change things? That the person on title has more control, more influence, more to say?
Well, they do not have more control. If we were to summarize everything I've spoken about thus far, going back to what I alluded to earlier, where the Divorce Act, the Family Law Act intersect with the Real Estate Act, the matrimonial home is legally protected to make it fair to both spouses. So to answer your question, yes, the part that you saw on the document, it's appropriately named spousal consent. And I think I mentioned this a few minutes ago. Regardless of who's on title, And regardless of if one spouse owned the home before the date of marriage, if they lived in the home together during the marriage, then for all intents and purposes, it's likely going to be defined. There's more to the definition, but I don't want to give legal advice here. For all intents and purposes, if it's defined as a matrimonial home, that's why I was saying a few minutes ago, both spouses must agree on everything, because if one spouse doesn't agree, no, I don't agree to what you want to list it at or how much you're willing to accept, blah, blah, blah. If that spouse who's not on title does not sign spousal consent, you've got nothing. The documents are not binding. There is no legal agreement or contract. There's no purchase and sale. There's no listing agreement. So the part that you're alluding to, called spousal consent, even if one spouse is not on title, if it's a matrimonial home, that both spouses must sign where appropriate on all documents.
A couple minutes ago, you said something about a divorce coach. What the heck is a divorce coach? And did you get one?
I didn't know about it when I went through my divorce, which was, I guess, about 11, 12 years ago. Now I think they're gold in a divorce
Gold,
process.
really? Seriously? That's incredible.
Yeah.
Why?
So what is a divorce coach? And a lot of people, when I talk about it, divorce coaches to some of my clients, they say, oh, I don't need a therapist. Well, let me clear up a stigma. There's a huge difference between a therapist and a coach. A therapist helps you deal with trauma from the past. A divorce coach will coach and advise you on everything moving forward, from planning to and depending on where you are. Some people get a divorce coach to say, I want to leave my ex and I don't know how, or leave my spouse and I don't know how, to I'm in the middle of a divorce and it's becoming very tumultuous, so I need a coach, to how do I move on happy and healthy after the divorce. So a divorce coach isn't like a gym coach where they say, 5 more, 4 more, 3 more. A divorce coach will help you gather all your appropriate documents, prepare for meetings with your lawyer, which effectively saves you legal fees. One of the biggest mistakes I made, and I've seen hundreds of my clients make, is they forget lawyers give legal advice, but they go to their lawyer and they start for an hour and a half, they start sharing all the things they should be sharing with a therapist or a divorce coach at $500, $600, $700 an hour that has no legal bearing. So a divorce coach will help you save time and cost with your lawyer, preparing the necessary documents. They'll help you with what you should and shouldn't say. They'll help you with how to co-parent if there are kids involved and your spouse is a high conflict personality. There are many, many different advantages. We could talk at great length about a divorce coach, but if anybody's going through divorce and wants to know more about what a divorce coach can do at a fraction of the price of lawyers, they're very good at helping you prepare, stay focused, stay on path, and make the process with less mistakes and more successful and easier for you.
A divorce coach is golden. Fascinating advice. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back in just 2 minutes with our guest, talking about divorce and real estate and selling your home during a divorce. Is it different? Is it challenging? How do you get through it? And a book that Michael Shuster has written about this topic. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be back in just 2 minutes on the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. Stay with us. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. In 2011, Michael Shuster became Ontario's first real estate divorce specialist, and in 2019, he became Ontario's first certified divorce specialist by the National Association of Divorce Professionals. He has guided hundreds of couples through many obstacles and complications that arise when selling a matrimonial home or other real estate assets in a divorce. And he's with us here tonight to talk about selling a home during a divorce. So Michael, let's go back a bit and say, why is it so different? You've explained the matrimonial home. You've explained, the rights that both couples have, whether one is on title or both are on title. But why is it so different? Why is it so challenging?
Well, why is it different? Like I said earlier, the foundation is different. It's challenging because both people have to come to an agreement. But another part to your question is what's different. I just started with the foundation. The reality is, because there are so many unique hurdles and obstacles and things that can come up in a divorce sale that don't normally come up, I've actually created a comprehensive program, for lack of a better word, that whenever I get clients who are going through divorce, but me, my secretary, my assistant, anybody who works with my office staff, they're all involved in this. So let me just highlight, in the interest of time, I'll highlight some of the many things that we do differently where necessary, because every divorce is different,
Is
by
this
the
like a
way.
checklist that's in your book?
It's a checklist, yeah.
Fantastic. The top 10 things to do when you're divorcing and selling a home. Go for it, Michael.
Yeah, so it started right from staging. Staging a home, stagers, with all due respect, because I think they're very valuable, focus on artwork, area rugs, coffee tables, how to make a home look more presentable. Well, one of the first divorce sales I did about 12 years ago, one of the spouses moved out of the matrimonial home, which is common. And then when buyers come to see, there's only women's clothing in the front hall closet and in the master bedroom walk-in closet. And they can see that there's only a woman living here. I mean, maybe there's kids, but the point being, when buyers agents book showings, they can see on the listing, Mr. Jones and Mrs. Jones. So right away, if there isn't Mr. and Mrs. clothing in the home, they know it's a divorce, which means they'll lowball offers. So everything from staging, so that people don't know that it's a divorce
Really?
sale.
So you're suggesting even if one of the spouses moves out, keep some of their clothes, or at least
Keep some of their stuff
sex.
there. Yeah. Or I'll tell my stagers to bring stuff in, because we don't want to divulge motivation. We don't want to divulge it's a divorce, because buyers will lowball offers. So
Really? You think that
staging.
most people, when seeing a matrimonial home for sale during a divorce, will lowball the offer?
Especially in this market.
That's interesting. Okay, this is great. So go on.
Yeah, not during the COVID pandemic when there were bidding wars, because then you're bidding against other people. But in the current market and in any normal balanced market, yes, they'll lowball offers if they know that.
Is there a way
The
that you
negotiating
can
is different.
search for matrimonial homes for sale?
No, no, there's no way to figure that out.
The
No.
agents must get to know it after a while.
Tough. No, like I said, it's usually the telltale signs. And so, in this list, the top 10 list that we're talking about, what I do differently, for the most part, there's two purposes. One is to make sure people don't know it's a divorce. And the other is, if there are kids involved, to protect their mental health and make sure that they're not, it's not a traumatic process for them. So, like I said, everything from staging.
No wedding pictures torn in half left out.
That's right.
Okay,
That's
good.
right. Often we won't do open houses. We don't want strangers coming in, nosy neighbors asking questions. But, when it comes to the kids, so here's something most people won't think about. I had a sale where we listed the home. Parent brings the kid home from school the day I listed the house, sees the for sale sign on the lawn, and sees a lockbox on the front door, which is standard. And all of a sudden, the kid realizes, oh my gosh, the whole life, and a younger kid, when they see that for sale sign, it becomes real. When they see the lockbox, all of a sudden they know that strangers are going to be in their safe space. So many of the divorce sales I do not put a sign on the lawn. I have to market and sell the home without a sign on the lawn. And very often, if I can't put a lockbox on the door, if they're tender age children, I will be there for every showing to let people in and monitor what goes on. So little things like that most realtors is standard procedure, but we have to take into account the kids and even the parents if there's mental health issues. Many realtors, when they list a home for sale, usually people in the area, if they have relatives or friends that want to move closer or are immigrating, we'll do postcards, coming soon or just listed, because we want to market to the area. Well, in divorce sales, often I don't do that, because then everybody's asking, well, where are they going? Why are they selling? Why are they splitting? What's going on? And so very often our marketing is different, so as to not divulge the divorce, if you will.
So different staging, different marketing. What else?
A different process or different rules for my staff. So I had one case several years ago, and everything I've created is based on experience. So one case I had years ago, a spouse moves out of the home with her new baby because she was afraid of her husband. Her husband was allegedly an extreme narcissist, very much in control. So the husband was living in the home, unemployed. And what he did was, behind my back and her back, call my secretary and alter the showing instructions for any buyers that want to make an appointment to come see the home, which is not allowed. First of all, there was a court order that he cannot interfere, but more importantly, uh, um, based on what we talked about at the beginning of this call, the matrimonial home, both spouses are required to receive equal and fair treatment from the realtor. Well, right away, he was tipping the scales in his end for control. So my process now, what I do different is normally if somebody calls my secretary and wants to make a change, they'll do it just in the interest of efficiency. In a divorce listing, every single every single change to anything that my staff receive from clients must be okayed and authorized by me before anything is done or changed. Both to protect my reputation, to make sure my back's on the line, I don't want to get in trouble, but also to make sure that one spouse can't interfere or leverage control over the other spouse.
So, that's interesting that you got to have this equal and fair treatment. It makes a lot of sense. I have heard about numerous situations where you've got this process in a sale where one spouse has to pick a couple of agents and then the other spouse picks one from that list of agents. It seems like the typical way that divorce courts decide that you're actually going to ultimately pick an agent. Doesn't that spouse that actually ultimately picks the successful agent have more influence and control in the situation?
Well, it's funny you ask that, because that's one of my biggest frustrations. If you can see me pausing for words. I mean, there's so much to what you just asked, and probably one of the best questions I'll ever answer. It is harder for divorcing couples to pick a realtor. And the reason it's so frustrating, and the reason that lawyers and courts and judges will say, put three names in a hat, it's all for waste. It's all for the wrong reasons. So what do I mean by that? Why does that happen? Well, let me simplify it, if I may. Most people, the biggest conflict is choosing the realtor. Why do they fight over choosing the realtor? Well, as soon as they're getting divorced, there's lack of trust. I don't trust the realtor you choose. You don't trust the realtor they choose, blah, blah, blah. Why? Well, back in the day, people started thinking, well, maybe if your realtor knows you, you'll make a deal under the table, or you'll favor that spouse type of thing. And so we have to pick somebody neutral. Well, here's the reality. Number one, the realtor can't favor anybody in the process, because both spouses must sign everything, or there are no changes, from showing instructions to listing to anything in the process. We've talked about this already at great length. So there is no way a realtor can choose sides, if you will. What can happen if a realtor's not trained in divorce sales like I am, it's human nature to choose the path of least resistance. So what they might do is communicate more often with a spouse who's lower conflict and more agreeable, but they can't choose sides. But the bigger picture, Brian, the bigger thing is they're afraid of a spouse making a deal under the table. Well, here's what everybody forgets, including the lawyers and judges sometimes, with all due respect. The realtor doesn't touch any of the money. The realtor doesn't handle the money. They can't make a deal under the table. It's the real estate lawyer that handles the closing and distributes the money. So what they really need to, I don't want to say fight about, what they really need to do their due diligence on is choosing the right real estate lawyer. It's not about the realtor. It's about the real estate lawyer. And there is, if you want me to share, there is a very simple solution. Whether you go with the real estate lawyer you want or your spouse is insistent, there's a simple way to protect yourself so that no deals are done under the table, so to speak. So there's a lot of fighting over, something that is not worth fighting over.
So choosing that real estate agent and lawyer is critically important. You're saying in the end they've got to work for both parties, but everyone's got a friend. Everyone's got an uncle or a cousin or a friend down the street that's a realtor.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
therefore, I have met and interviewed numerous different people that say the worst thing you can do is pick a realtor based on a relationship. You got to pick it based on whether they're competent and capable and are going to do the right job for you. But a lot of people don't do that. They do it based on relationship, and so therefore, aren't those realtors going to have biases no matter what?
Yes. Um, you touched on two good points there. So first of all, not this book that we talked about today, but the first book I wrote 10 years ago was about choosing a realtor. And to your point, everybody knows a realtor. Most people choose friends and family. Should you work with friends and family? That's for another day, another conversation. Should you work with friends and family during a divorce? Absolutely not. Because to your point, which is bang on, hit the nail right on the head, it would be extremely difficult, if not impossible, for that realtor to not um, choose sides. Now, there's not much they can do because I just finished saying realtors can't choose sides, but it would definitely make the process much more stressful, difficult, and for the spouse who did not agree to the realtor, a lot more lack of trust and stress and anxiety. But you know what, Brian? Why do everybody knows a realtor and they have friends and family, the bigger question here is why do they often do go with someone they know? Well, the answer is very simple. They think they'll get the friends and family discount. One of the things people say to me time and time again is, Michael, we're going through divorce, so we can't leave any money on the table. Every dollar counts. Well, let me ask you something. Who doesn't want as much money for the sale? And when doesn't every dollar count? No disrespect to people going through divorce, because I've been there, done that. But sellers always want as much as possible, and they don't want to leave anything on the table for buyers or lawyers or realtors or anything else. It's always about the money, make no mistake. But the biggest mistake is, so they'll choose a realtor who says, "I'll give you the friends and family discount." So they might save $2 or $3 or $4,000 in a commission, which, by the way, is being split in half. But they might not be going with a realtor that could get $30, $40, $50,000 more for the sale of the property. So it's what my accountant would call penny wise, pound foolish. They'll go with somebody where they'll save a little bit, but by choosing somebody who's not skilled and trained and experienced in the unique aspects of selling a matrimonial home in divorce, they might save a little bit but lose a lot. And so, what I usually tell people is I respect that you know a realtor, you're related to a realtor, you play hockey with a realtor, your best friend's a realtor. My advice is let me help you with the sale because there's so much that your realtor may not be skilled or experienced to handle. And then use that realtor to go buy your next home, and I won't be the least bit offended.
There's also other issues that need to
Mhm.
come up,
Okay.
and please correct me if I'm wrong. But different realtors can have different points of view, not just on staging and marketing and things like that you talked about, but things in the contract negotiations, like the size of the deposit, about what conditions are acceptable, financing conditions, inspection conditions, what repairs need to get done, if any, prior to the marketing and staging. So I think that there's numerous different issues that come up both during the marketing and then during the contract negotiations that you really want someone experienced and capable on your side. You can sometimes get the biggest price if you're willing to accept a small deposit, but then the question is, are they going to close?
Well, yes, 100%. I mean, question is, are they going to close? Question about the size of the deposit, the conditions, and things like that. And so you're absolutely right. And many realtors may handle that differently. Um, but if I can hone in now on something on that topic, something specific to divorce, because I've said this a few times, and hiring a realtor who specializes in this. I use that word a lot, and some people might say, "Well, what the heck do you? Give us an example of what your specialized knowledge is," because people love real examples. So here's an example of something you just brought up, Brian. I had a sale last year, about a year and a half ago. $3 million home. Both spouses are obviously professionals. One was a dentist and one was a lawyer, I believe. Both make good income. And in acrimonious divorces, people will fight over sometimes, the silliest things, whether it's to spite their spouse, whether they're worried about the money, or whether for many, many reasons. So the bottom line is here, Brian, we got an offer and the buyers did an inspection and the washing machine needed a part that was $400. $3 million sale. The washing machine needed a part that was $400, and neither spouse would agree to fix the washing machine, which to them, given their income and the sale of the house, it's a drop in the bucket. But on principle, they both refuse. Now, a realtor who does not specialize in this would not necessarily know what to say to them. Work your stuff out, call your lawyer at $700 an hour. I don't know what to tell you anymore. Here's what I told them. I don't give legal advice, but I explained what I understand about the equalization process in a divorce, and which equalization is from the time of marriage to the time of separation. But there's also what's called post-separation adjustments, which is after the date of separation. And so what I said to each spouse is, if you can afford the $400, get it done, get the sale closed, give the bill to your lawyer, and your spouse is going to pay half of that cost, whether he or she likes it or not, because it'll be deducted in the post-separation adjustments. And they said, oh, really? So they paid the $400, and the spouse ended up paying $200, splitting the cost via post-separation adjustments. By me telling them that, they avoided hours of billings from their lawyers, and we avoided losing the sale or the sale not closing, and avoided a lot of conflict and stress that they didn't have to go through. So it's an example of, when I use the word specialized, Brian, a lot of people say they're specialists because it makes them sound fancy. You see it on a bus bench. I maintain, when you specialize in something, like I specialize in divorce sales, you have specialized knowledge that others in your profession may not have. Just like a general practitioner doctor, a family doctor wouldn't do brain surgery. So there is specialized knowledge and skills, which is why when it comes to divorce, you should work with somebody who specializes in divorce, not friends and family.
You're suggesting that selling a house in a divorce is like brain surgery? Just kidding. We're chatting tonight with Michael Shuster,
Sometimes.
who is an expert in and a specialist in selling homes that are subject to divorce. Stay with us, everyone. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back in 2 minutes with Michael Shuster, who's written this book, who's got the certifications, who's got the experience when going through a divorce on his own. We're going to be back in 2 minutes. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. One of the biggest assets, if not almost always the biggest asset that couples have, is their home, their matrimonial home. And we're chatting tonight with Michael Shuster, who is a divorce real estate specialist, talking about selling a home that is subject to a divorce. Having experienced his own divorce in 2014, Michael is also not only able to be that real estate agent that has the knowledge, but he's able to empathize with his clients, and he understands the intense and often very volatile emotions that can affect decision-making skills when navigating divorce and the sale of the home. He's already talked about some of the challenges in regards to close, to kids, to lock boxes, to open houses, etc. And I understand, Michael, that many family law lawyers have given your book a 5-star rating. Congratulations for that.
Yeah, thank you.
One managing partner insisted that every lawyer and associate in their firm read the book, and another lawyer required his articling students to read it. So this must be something that is of great value. I appreciate that. So we've talked about sort of why it's different, how it's different, etc. So tell us some of the scare stories. What are some of the things that can go wrong? You got a top 10 list?
Yeah, no, there's so many that just went through my head. So there's something that I call showing sabotage, which is very common. So I already talked about one spouse called my
showing
secretary.
Sabotage. Oh my God.
Yeah. Let's talk about showing sabotage. So very often, if one spouse ended the marriage and the other spouse is in denial, does not want the marriage to end, or is not an income earner and is afraid, out of fear we do, certain things in life, they may not want the home to sell. Where the heck are they going to live? They don't want to live on the street or whatever have you. Or if they're a narcissist, they want to be in control, which is, again, another conversation for another time. So what have I seen as showing sabotage? I had one case where the spouse who was unemployed living in the home would make sure they were home whenever buyers and their agents would come, follow them around the home and tell them everything that was wrong with the home so that they wouldn't want to buy it. I had one case where a spouse moved out with the children into another home temporarily. The spouse who was in denial was living in the marital home. And so when buyers came, we did not know this until I showed up unexpectedly. That person living in the home took crayons and wrote graffiti on the walls in the kids' bedroom and took all the kids' toys and stuff and scattered it all over the living room that had been staged. Basically just trying and left smelly pots and pans and dishes in the sink piled high, sabotaging the sale by deterring buyers, making them not want to buy it.
What's the hope there that they're going to lower their proceeds? Can't be. It's what that it's never.
No, their hope is the buyer will not make an offer.
So they're just going to be able to stay in the home.
Yeah, denying the inevitable, kicking the can down the road. Yeah,
kicking the can down the road. I've heard that before. Okay, go on.
Yeah.
Go on. What else? Showing sabotage.
Well, they're showing sabotage. Yeah, what else can go wrong? Horror stories. I had one just a few months ago. Husband had a restraining order, could not go in the home for the past 3 years, could not live in the home, visit the home, or go within 30 meters of the home, something to that effect. And so they both had to agree on me through their lawyers. They hired me to sell the home. And so the wife is living in the home with the children. Closing day, they accept an offer. It's closing day. And the wife moves out with the children and leaves all of the husband's clothing and furniture in the home out of spite. Just did not want to pay to have it removed, which I understand you don't want to pay for it, but you know that there's a court order. Your husband couldn't come remove it. But here's what happened. Here's what's silly about what happened. In the purchase and sale agreement, it says the home must be completely empty. You don't want to buy a home, Brian, move in there, and then have to spend $6,000 to get rid of the previous seller's stuff. So the family law lawyer for the husband called me and said, we're at noon on closing day. This just happened. What the heck can we do? Luckily, I was able to gather my team, get a big truck, get over to that house and get everything out of there and into storage before 5 o'clock on closing day. So as a divorce specialist, I need to be able to drop certain things and, pick up where you need to. But what that wife did, what she doesn't realize, no offense to her, but what she doesn't realize is you're doing something to spite your soon-to-be ex. But if the buyers move in and I didn't clear out what I did, the buyers would sue both spouses. They wouldn't sue the husband because it was his stuff, which is what she wanted to believe. You're both sellers if it's a matrimonial home. You're both potentially going to be sued. So she almost shot herself in the foot. Luckily, we were able to save that from happening, but that's just another crazy example that first time that happened. But you'd be amazed what people think of and conjure up just to spite people or out of fear, out of anger, whatever have you.
What made you choose this area of specialization? What motivated you?
I didn't choose it. It was kind of chosen for me. And what I mean by that was, so it was about, like I said, it was about 12 years ago, give or take a few months. I was referred, a lady referred me to her best friend. She said, my friend really needs your help. Going through divorce, husband left her for another woman, moved out. He's a narcissist, not giving her any money to feed the kids. They have 4 kids. And this best friend, this wife who was living in the home with the kids, had cancer. So she couldn't work. She was going for chemo, et cetera, et cetera. And the bank was just sent notice they're going to force power of sale. So she's got 3 months to sell the house and get out. And it had been listed previously with 2 different realtors, one for 4 months, one for 3 months. Both realtors were unsuccessful in selling the home. So I went to meet with this lady, and she gave me a tour of the home, and I sat down with her, and she told me what she needed. She told me she was afraid of her husband. Anyway, to make a much longer story short, Not only was I able to buy time at the bank because I understood the power of sale laws in Canada and things like that, but more importantly, she was afraid the spouse was going to come into the house when there's a showing and she's not there, potentially steal things, poison food, put hidden cameras. She had all sorts of fears and concerns. So again, realtors aren't taught law, lawyers aren't taught real estate. And what I learned from lawyers was unless there's a court order giving her exclusive possession, he does have the right to access the home. Many realtors may not know this if they don't seek to learn how the law affects a matrimonial home. So I suggested that she call her lawyer and get exclusive possession. Then jump ahead,
How
we
does
get a
one
great
get exclusive possession? You got to go to court to get it granted.
court lawyer files a motion in court and has to prove to a judge why.
And so
Yeah.
if one spouse voluntarily leaves the house upon separation, it doesn't automatically provide the remaining spouse with exclusive possession. You got to go to court to get it.
Yeah, if a spouse moves out voluntarily, they can come back anytime, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. You cannot change the locks, you cannot lock them out. Both spouses have equal access, whether they sleep there every day or not, unless there's a court order or exclusive possession or restraining order or something to that effect.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Michael,
So how I chose this, or how it chose me, between dealing with the bank, dealing with exclusive possession, then when we got an offer and the spouse refused to sign spousal consent, which we talked about a short while ago. Uh, again, I said you've got to call your lawyer because your lawyer can file a motion for an emergency motion. She said, "What's an emergent or an urgent motion?" Sorry, I said urgent. When you file a motion, it could be 3, 6, 8 weeks before there's a court date. If there's an urgent motion, it's usually heard within 24 to 48 hours. And if the spouse doesn't show up and convince a judge why they should not accept the offer, then a judge, and only a judge, can dispense with the need for spousal consent. And so we ended up doing that. So we got the house sold when the spouse wouldn't agree. So here's the answer to your question, Brian. I was just doing everything I could possibly do to give great service and a great result to a client in need. What happened is I learned one of many lessons in my career is when I do a good job for men, generally they just say, thank you very much. When I do a good job for women, they talk, they tell others. And so this client, this female, the wife, told a number of her friends, not only did I sell the house when other realtors didn't, saved her, saved her butt from the bank, saved her butt twice from her husband, things like that, which I was just doing my job. That year, 20% of my business were referrals, women going through divorce. Now, ultimately, both spouses become my client, but it's the woman who called me as a result of a referral. The next year was 30%, 40%. So I didn't say, you know what, this divorce thing
it
is
just came to you.
interesting. I want to pursue this. It just kind of
It chose
snowballed.
you. Sounds good.
It snowballed. Yeah.
Michael Schuster, what's the title of the book and where can we all get it?
It's called Divorce and Selling Your Home, Everything Legal, Financial, and Practical You Need to Know. It covers not only much of what we've talked about, but 100 of the most popular questions people are always asking. It covers the whole process. It's available on Amazon. I think it's $16.95, not expensive at all. And yeah, it's a great read. Lawyers have read it and said, "Oh, I didn't know that." It talks about what if one spouse moves out and stops paying the mortgage? Things that we don't think about and how to protect ourselves.
Sounds like it's a very critical book for anyone that is going through divorce and needs to sell a house, which probably is most everybody. Michael Schuster, thanks so much. We're going to take a final break and come back with one last question for Michael, maybe two, because he's probably going to say, well, that's a whole topic for another conversation. But you have
Possibly.
said about 5 times the word narcissist.
Yeah,
And I understand you've got extensive training in narcissistic personality disorder. I'm going to ask
that's
you,
right.
what the heck is that? Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes.
That's right.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. We've had, I think, a really good in-depth conversation with Michael Schuster, who last year released his latest book, Divorce and Selling Your Home, Everything Legal, Financial, and Practical You Need to Know. Sounds like it's a book that, frankly, I should have bought a couple of years ago. And Michael, I wish I had met you a couple of years ago. I won't go into that personal anecdote and story as well. But I got to tell you, You've used a word about 5 times in our conversation, narcissism. And I understand that you've got some training, some extensive training in something called narcissistic personality disorder. This is a word, narcissism, that, I've heard a whole bunch of times in the last couple of years. I didn't even know existed, a decade ago. So what's going on?
Yeah. Well, you're right. It's become more and more prominent, not just the word, but the personality disorder. It is a disorder. The word narcissism, or he's a narcissist, she's a narcissist, has become what I call a generic term. Just like we might say, I need a Xerox when we mean a photocopy, or I need a Kleenex when we need a tissue. People are using the word narcissist to describe any soon-to-be ex who's just not agreeable. Well, in 99.9% of divorces, a spouse will not be agreeable to everything. Narcissistic personality disorder is, in fact, a disorder, and not everybody is a narcissist. But just to keep it short and simple, for people that do have NPD, there are several characteristics, but the underlying foundation, the whole umbrella that covers it all, is the need for control. We don't have time to go into what is NPD and why do they have it, but when it applies to selling a matrimonial home in divorce or going through the divorce process, a narcissist, or an extreme narcissist, has the fear of losing control over their spouse or their partner. And so they'll try to control every aspect of the sale, every aspect of the divorce, and every aspect of their life. So as I'm a certified negotiator, so I was intrigued, because you can't really negotiate with a narcissist, but lawyers will call me and say, opposing counsel, opposing spouse is a narcissist, and we thought we had a deal in the 11th hour, something came out of left field, et cetera, et cetera. So I set out to learn everything I could about NPD. And what I learned is you can't negotiate with them, but when you understand what motivates them, why they think the way they do, why they do what they do, there are ways that we can move the process along successfully. So I've had to deal with a lot where one spouse is an empath and the other spouse is a narcissist. And there are ways when a narcissist or a spouse is going to sabotage the sale, or whatever the case may be, there are solutions, there are ways to communicate that can make things more smooth, less stressful, and more successful in the long run.
Sounds like we're going to have to get together again, Michael, and talk all about narcissistic personality disorder.
Yeah.
Sound NPD, never heard that before.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that comes out of your conversation, there's no question about it, is hire the right realtor that's got some experience in divorce, because it is very different. You've described how the matrimonial home makes things extremely different. I think that choosing that real estate agent ends up being critical. You said there's something like the 85-15 rule. What's the 85-15 rule?
I was actually surprised to learn it myself, although I see it every day. The Ontario Real Estate Association does extensive studies every year, and over the last every year they do a study to see how many realtors are part-time and how many realtors are full-time. Although we don't punch a time clock, so how do they figure that out? Well, the answer is they calculate the number of sales. And what the statistics they released last year over the last 3 years, it was an average over 3 years, 85% of the licensed realtors in Ontario sold an average of 1.5 houses a year. So how do you sell half a house? It's an average over 3 years. Point being, 85% of realtors out there are part-time and only sell an average of 1.5 houses a year. And I would say to that, Brian, you wouldn't go to a part-time dentist for a root canal. You wouldn't hire a part-time lawyer to defend you in court. Why would you trust a part-time realtor to sell what is likely your single largest asset in what is likely one of the most volatile and acrimonious processes of your life? Just like you'd want a brain surgeon if you need brain surgery, or you'd want a dental surgeon or an experienced dentist if you need a root canal. You want a realtor who's not just going to give you the best commission, but somebody who can help you navigate the process, as we've talked about for the last while, navigate the process of selling a matrimonial home and divorce. So only 15% of the licensed realtors work full-time and have the hands-on experience. And not all of them are divorce specialists. Very few of us are. So it always comes in, whether you're hiring a doctor, a lawyer, accountant, a financial advisor, or a realtor, It comes down to hiring somebody with the knowledge, the skills, the experience, and the right fit for you.
Michael, do you have a website that people should go to if they're interested in checking you out?
Yeah, www.schusterrealestate.com. If you want, there's a button there. You can click on divorce, or you can go to schusterrealestate.com/divorce.
Michael Shuster, who's the author of a book called Divorce and Selling Your Home. Everything legal, financial, and practical you need to know, which is an Amazon bestseller. Thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank
It is
you.
that single biggest asset that the vast majority of us own. Half of us supposedly go through a divorce, or I think it's 57%. And so therefore, hiring someone smart, reading your book, being prepared, getting the right lawyer, trying to get some of the emotion out of it and making the right financial decision with your most important asset. Sounds like it's pretty critically important to me. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody. Michael, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's
Thank
our
you.
show for tonight, everybody. Thank you for joining. I remind you, I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream it online at www.saga960am.ca. All my podcasts and videos go up on my website, briancrombie.com, on social media, my YouTube channel, on podcast servers as soon as the radio show goes to air. Good night, everybody. Thanks, Michael.